MultiGreen, building attainable, sustainable, and tech-enabled multifamily real estate through impact investing.
Welcome to the MultiGreen podcast. I'm your host, Randy Norton, and today we'll be speaking with Bobby Gilbane V, Vice President of Gilbane Development. They are a multi-generational, privately owned family company who are leaders in real estate development, investment, and property management. And their goal is to serve as a single resource for navigating all of the variables associated with real estate development, construction, financing, operations, and management. We discuss how to flip the script on how collectively we can make housing attainable. Enjoy our conversation. Bobby, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thanks so much, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I know you well, but our listeners may not. Tell us more about yourself and your family.
Absolutely. So, Bobby Gilbane, I am Vice President with Gilbane Development Company. Gilbane Development Company is the real estate development, property management, and financial arm of Gilbane Inc, the family-owned, privately held firm. It's 150 years old now. It's founded in Providence, Rhode Island by Irish immigrants who got their start building single-family homes in Providence, and a testament to their craftsmanship. A lot of those homes are still standing today. But the development company of Gilbane was founded in 1970 by my father. Gilbane itself was founded in 1870. So we're going on 150 years of operations. We are now heading into our sixth generation of family members either working for the company. As I mentioned, I'm part of the fifth generation. And I am based in Arlington, Virginia. More appropriately, I live in Washington, D.C., but I work out of our Arlington office and oversee our mid-Atlantic operations for the development company, specifically with a focus on our housing platform, whether that's student housing, market rate, or affordable. TOD developments tends to be more of my focus. I think I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment when it comes for large-scale land planning and delivery of complex communities. And more importantly, I'm excited to be part of a great team that has a tremendous amount of historical perspective and experience and looking to, move on to the next 150 years, as crazy as that may sound.
How many employees and locations do you now have, either here in the United States or globally?
Sure. Really, between our building company and development company, we have over 3,000 employees. It's been a robust, I'd say, several past decades of growth, especially. Last year, we did close to $7 billion worth of revenue. We are embedded throughout the United States in a variety of offices, whether that's our building company, development company, or we co-locate. We have around 40 offices in the country and are also active overseas, especially our building company, which does a lot of work for the federal government or specifically for corporate users, build-to-suit solutions or industrial delivery solutions overseas. So we're active throughout the world, which is interesting to say. I mean, you learn about new places all the time. For instance, we're doing some environmental cleanup and housing work for the military in Djibouti, which is a tough place to get to. And more importantly, it's a tough place to get people to go. So, we work on a wide variety of projects. There's always something that's incredibly intriguing or interesting. And I know as you and I have had a lot of conversations about, it really sets the stage for the nexus of what do all these experiences mean? How do you take the latest and greatest, marry that up with past experiences and try to hone the edge, constantly trying to hone that edge in terms of delivering product, working with partners, and just overall trying to be better, because that's something that we always strive to do.
Kaizen, continuous improvement. I bet your knowledge base and lessons learned is vast and impressive. What are some of the things you guys do today to remind yourselves or to implement some of these lessons learned over 150 years?
Sure. It's one of the things that I'm probably most proud of the family company is the intentionality over the last several decades, not only to document from a family perspective how we got here, which is incredibly important. You can never forget where you came from and how it was built. So whether that's family history, our family, again, it's a privately held company outside of having a largely independent board of directors, which is something that we did in the 90s to ensure that There wasn't an echo chamber of leadership, really bringing in best in class outside individuals, as I know that's something you've done at MultiGreen, to hold up best practices, whether that's corporate governance or just your financing or audit committees, you name it, but also internalizing and making sure the history resonates and that the lessons learned along the way don't go away. Now, I, as a family member, have I'd say the luxury of having learned a lot of those lessons at the breakfast table or dinner table over the years, but for the rest of the 3,000 plus employees, where is that all documented? And so we've spent a tremendous amount of time coming up with playbooks, Gilbane University, online courses, helping to facilitate continuing education, whether that's within the industry that you're working in, could be construction or real estate development, or outside of that, to give our employees access to this great historical perspective. But you also have to make it come alive, right? It can't just be, here's the playbook. This is what worked in 1870, which is, again, it's crazy to say, but a lot of those things are still relevant. And maybe perhaps not from a technological perspective, but from the big picture, this is how you get things done. As far as we've come in construction, in real estate development, things don't necessarily change all that much. And it's one of the reasons that I think what you are trying to launch and what you have launched and what we're endeavoring to do together is so incredible, because you're taking the next iteration of what is it that people need? What is it that people use? And we can say housing. And obviously that's something we're going to dig into more. The intersection of technology, finance. Life is complicated. The world is complicated. That doesn't mean that we should just push away from it and go back to doing things the same old way. Relentless pursuit of efficiency. And it's something that I want to talk about more today with you. Efficiency is the name of the game. We have limited resources. We have limited time, if we want to consider that a resource as well. And there's a lot that we need to get done. And we need to get it done quickly and in a way that's very repeatable. And so getting back to the original question, that's something we as a company want to ensure. You stick in person X, they've just parachuted into a particular project or region, you need to get them up to speed quickly. We have documented all those resources. Again, the continuing education, we have centers of excellence along all of our business lines, whether that's higher ed, healthcare, bio, med, student housing, you name it. We always want to have subject matter experts. And then the other piece to that is we're always partnering with subject matter experts. It doesn't matter if you've been doing this for 150 years, 300 years, 20 years, 5 years. You always need to find competent partners who are going to hold you accountable and also bring to the table their own skill set and expertise. Again, it's that relentless pursuit of always improving, even if it's incremental improvement, because 10 years from now, if you've done nothing but incrementally improve along the way, you're going to look back and be shocked at how far you've come. And it also just sets the standard for other people. Again, each one of these things that we do, whether it's projects or in our daily lives, you try to hold yourself up to be accountable and to be a person that someone could point to and say, well, they're getting it done. If that person's getting it done, how difficult can it be? And the more people you have choosing that mentality of, it may be difficult, but we can get it done. Getting up this morning was difficult, but I did it and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm a big fan of celebrating, even if it's the small things in life. I was joking with my wife the other day, like, hey, I tied my shoes without screwing up. I'm going to celebrate that because the rest of this day is going to be a difficult one. So if you can't put a smile on your face and start correctly each and every day, that, again, it's just setting the table for success.
That's great perspective. You mentioned continuous improvement. You mentioned subject matter expertise. Both of those resonate here at MultiGreen. How does one inside of our company, like MultiGreen, become a graduate of Gilbane University?
Well, I think, Randy, you're far too modest. What I think that you have done, and it starts with the attitude of, I know I bring something to the table, but I also know that I need people to help me out. Whatever this dream is, it's not being delivered on my own. And so seeking the outside knowledge, being very humble about it, which you have done so in spades. And, at Gilbane, we're big fans of having no pride in authorship because it doesn't matter what we've done or how we've got here. Life isn't prescriptive. The delivery of these assets, whether it's affordable housing or otherwise, it need not be so prescriptive. And so I think when you come with a collaborative mindset, of sincere desire to work well with others and to be transparent about your needs. What do you need, especially if we're approaching partnerships? What do you need from your own business's perspective to be successful? And when we start joint ventures with any partnership, and we've done, gosh, so many great ones, but especially recently on our affordable housing platform, partnering with minority-owned development shops that had all the expertise in the world, but maybe didn't have the resources. Could have been back of house. It could have been the balance sheet to deliver these things. When we are advancing projects, when we are helping advancing their own platform goals, that helps create really successful partnerships. And it's not so much them being, or you being a graduate of Gilbane University, as it is, we are also graduating from the MultiGreen University, right? There is so much that you are looking to innovate within housing solutions that has been, I'd say, at the forefront of what people are trying to do, but we all know how siloed we can get. Say, this is what I do. I deliver multifamily. I deliver affordable housing. My goal is just to deliver all of this. Instead of taking the time to take a step back, surround yourself with interesting people who have different perspectives or different ways of achieving the same goal. So what are you guys doing that's innovative? How are we advancing the ball? Because if we are not continuously advancing it, that's a failure. That's static. We all know that the way things have been done to date generally haven't worked, or haven't worked to the extent that's required to, I'd say, create a baseline for this country in terms of what we can talk about: attainable housing, just the quality of housing. We can talk about healthcare. We can talk about education. It's something that we know is incredibly expensive. But the one thing that I do know more than that is, if we don't deal with it today, it's going to be a heck of a lot more expensive tomorrow. These are things that we generally cannot afford, because when you have a housing crisis, when you have a health crisis, when you have an educational crisis, those just continue to build momentum. It's that negative momentum until you are generally crushing the economic output of a country. If half of your population is burdened by the cost of living in all these markets, to the extent that they cannot even look 2 days ahead, 3 days ahead, a month ahead, how am I getting out of this vicious cycle? We are not advancing the ball, and that is creating a real anchor around the collective neck of this country. It is something that we have gotten so accustomed to dealing with that people, again, it's like talking about outer space. People just, their head starts to hurt. That's too much. How do we deal with it? How do we deal with it? It's very simple. You start dealing with it at a local level. You start finding the right partners who are also sick and tired of the status quo and are generally excited to find new innovative solutions to fix this. Because if we're not fixing it today, the problem will exist tomorrow. And that's something collectively, when you kind of get arm in arm with some other folks and say enough is enough. I'm not gonna wait for those guys. Everyone's always, oh, well, those guys will fix it. That problem, those guys will fix it. That's not true. We will fix it. And then when we start pointing the finger inwards, and it doesn't even have to be massive projects. And we all love to talk about the numbers and the sheer scale, and the statistics are eye-popping. But that, again, there's statistics, and then there's, let's talk about the people, and let's talk about the communities. And let's talk about, if you were to come back to an area 5 years from now, how your mind could be completely blown by how much got delivered and how many different ways we have activated communities, empowered communities, created a true sense of ownership, even when we're only delivering, rental product. How do I allow someone to say, this is mine? And when people start to create that level of ownership, my God, it's incredible what they'll do. Again, it's getting away from this prescriptive idea of, I know what's best. I know what's best is if I show up at a community and I listen. What are your needs? And then we collectively decide with great partners and community involvement, because they need to be heard every step along. Every community's needs are different. But what do we always try to do is we deliver the same old thing, right? Well, has that worked? No. I mean, fits and starts, sure. But we talk about this from a project perspective, not a platform perspective. Or very few groups talk about it from a platform perspective. You certainly have interviewed a lot of people on your podcast who talk about it from a platform perspective. And then those same people drop down to project level and they deliver. But again, what is MultiGreen trying to do? You say 1,000 units, 2,000 units, No. Let's start at 30. Let's start at 30, but let's do it in a localized manner. This isn't scattershot, right? This is, we're going to get this done in communities that I know, in communities that we can quickly achieve our goal. It's these achievable goals that make me super excited, but you're doing it at a platform level. And people can get plugged in at a platform level, and it becomes something much greater than just, let's go do it on our own.
That's great insight. I want to get into this innovation that we're definitely working on together with. But before we get into the innovation and the solutions that we're trying to prescribe to, let's talk about the problems, what needs to be solved. The theme of this year's season of podcasts is attainability, and specifically attainable housing. And you have a great perspective from the development side, the development process, and the construction side. Or another way to say it, you understand the horizontal development and you understand the vertical construction element. Can you break down for me and the listeners the difficulties that you see from a development perspective and then from a construction perspective? How can the industry and country do it better? How can we deliver more attainable housing? What are these issues that are holding us back as an industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to be hyper-focused on a development perspective, again, we just go back to what the core issue is. And if we set at a very high level, there's not enough housing. There's not enough attainable housing, quality housing, especially where it's needed the most. There's been massive demographic shifts. COVID, we could talk about COVID being the great disruptor. It certainly accelerated trends that were already occurring. But if we just say, hey, there's not enough affordable housing, and I look at it, again, dropping down, I can say it project by project, it takes too long to entitle. It takes too long to deliver. It takes too long to finance. And that's not because there's not a sincere desire to have these delivered. We're working through very complex systems. And there's generally, I think, a fear to take the drastic steps needed to incredibly accelerate the delivery of affordable housing. Generally speaking, we're working within the same constructs, whether it's zoning, and you've had some fabulous conversations on your podcast about some of those local issues. The zoning, it doesn't permit enough density. It doesn't allow for entitlements to occur on a quick enough basis, where projects, out on the East Coast in the DC area, it may take you a year and a half to get entitlements. And then it's going to take you another 2 years to deliver a project. So we're talking upwards of 3.5 years on a typical size project that we'd be working on to deliver that. And in the meantime, the housing crisis grows and grows and grows. And we know that there is not enough of any product out there. So we can talk about the zoning issues. We can talk about the cost. Generally speaking, everything has gotten more expensive. And when you talk about attainable housing, you generally hear people talk about the subsidies that have been put together, $100 million here, $200 million there. Now the private sector is getting involved and actually making a significant difference. But these are all top line issues. And you and I know very well there's revenue and then there's net profit, right? So how much of these resources that we are throwing at the attainable housing, a housing crisis in this country, actually stick, right? So if you're throwing $1 at this, by the time it worms its way down to the system, 3.5 years later, right, and something's been delivered, how efficient was that dollar? So that top line issue versus reduce the barriers to delivery, speed up the process, and make every dollar more efficient. I'll tell you, one of the first experiences I had when I was helping reboot the Gilbane Development Company Affordable Housing Platform. We got our start in affordable housing in the 70s and delivered some great projects through some old HUD programs, HUD 5, HOPE 6. And then we got into some other things as we built a balance sheet. But I wanted to get back into it because I thought, given our size, given our being a private company, our long-term view towards investment, our long-term view of mission alignment in terms of the creation of attainable housing in these communities, our relationships with lenders, our balance sheet, construction expertise, we should be able to accelerate this. Well, I was wrong. Now, we've certainly made a difference and we've had a great impact, but you're working within archaic systems, whether it's the financing structures or just the housing delivery or a lot of requirements that come with the delivery of housing I was shocked to realize that your typical market rate housing project on a per unit basis could be anywhere between $80,000 to $200,000 per unit less expensive to deliver than quote unquote affordable housing. How insane is that? To say in Washington, the District of Columbia, on a recent project that we worked on, 38 units, senior affordable deal, because of the financing structure that we had to employ, because of some of the local, I'd say, hiring requirements, which everyone should be doing anyway. But in DC, you have a very limited pool of labor, especially skilled labor that can work on commercial jobs. So the cost to deliver this 38-unit project was $540,000 a unit. Now, this is wood frame, small. That same project, if it was market rate, could have been delivered for under $330,000 a unit. So when we think about that, where's the efficiency? How do we get there when we have less to work with? And I think you especially have thought a lot about this. We need to get rid of the need for subsidy to deliver attainable housing. Just from a pure business perspective, have you ever listened to someone say, "Hey, I have a great business model. I have an elevator pitch for you. Randy, it involves endless subsidy. That's the only thing that we need." You'd say, get out of the elevator. This is crazy, but yet that's the method we employ to deliver housing. My God, why would anyone trust it? Why does it? Of course, it's got a brand issue, right? That is not a flywheel that can, once you build the momentum, can keep spinning on its own in a virtuous way for years and decades and decades. So what do we need to do? I'm not saying we need to blow it all up, but clearly there's room for improvement and clearly there's room for innovation. And these are the types of things where, again, we work with qualified people who come from different industries because everything is interrelated. We understand how complex the world is. If you wanted to make it very simplistic, the knee bone's connected to the shoulder bone, right? I mean, this is what we're really talking about here. Kids understand, if I do this, that will happen. Well, if I work with talented people, good things will happen. If I refuse to be caught up in the same things that have slowed us down, we can talk about how do we advance the technology, modular construction, right? Innovative financial solutions, use of the capital markets, again, utilizing the hyper focus now on ESG. Like it or not, these are the private companies that have a ton of money and are looking to make investments. Now, it's not all just for charity, right? But these companies now have a huge focus on the quality of life of their employees. Why is that? Well, that's the number one resource that everyone is trying to harvest right now. So employers will now go meet their employees where they are, right? Let's go find the talent. How do we help subsidize on the private sector level the housing? And so you're seeing, especially on higher ed, healthcare, the tech sector, my God, the amount of money that they're pouring into housing, and that's not public subsidy at all. Those are hyper efficient dollars. Those don't come with a host of other requirements that make the dollar I receive from a state government worth 50 cents. And the funny thing about that, when you even drill down further, is most of those trust fund dollars that are going to the delivery of attainable housing, affordable housing, those are dollars that were taxed in the first place by real estate deals to begin with. Transfer and recordation dollars. So if you're getting taxed on a dollar basis and then they're giving you 75 cents, but that 75 cents because the cost and other requirements is really worth 35 cents. Well, I don't need to be an economist to understand there's something fundamentally wrong with that structure.
Bobby, I've been doing this podcast for a few years now, and that last 10 minutes was the most valuable insight on the attainable housing issue of our day, especially here in the United States, and how difficult it is to make projects pencil. That was fantastic perspective. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, and the one thing that I really do want to focus on here is because it always tends to fall on, well, it's these larger companies, larger developers, and they're the ones advancing the ball, which is great. We love to do more and more work. But the reality is there's a ton of talent in terms of smaller businesses, smaller developers in these communities that may not have the same attraction for larger shops that are looking to make a difference. each project, large or small, they all come with the same problems, right? You're all spending the same amount of time to get these done. And those are the groups that can make an incremental but meaningful difference. It could be a 20-unit project. It could be an 8-unit project. They're the ones that have extremely limited resources. So when we start talking about the compounding effect of it takes a long time to do these deals, it takes a lot of money, there's a huge amount of uncertainty, they're the ones that can't deliver on the projects that have the most meaning in some of the far-flung parts of this country or cities that aren't the tier 1 cities that everyone's always talking about. And if we can help accelerate their expertise, their access to capital, we are helping solve the problem at both a micro level. And again, acting locally is incredibly important. You know, waiting for GSA, waiting for the federal government to come solve any problem. That's not how this country was founded in the first place. And we can complain about the federal government or all we want. But you know what? Don't show up. Don't come try to work on one of my projects if that's what you want to do. We can always go grab a beer afterwards, right? And we can all complain, but we got to roll up our sleeves and get it done. And you got to start doing that at a local level.
I love it. I want to ask you one more question. As Gilbane and MultiGreen continue to work together and implement all of your historical data and knowledge and expertise, we want to deliver, obviously, a more attainable housing product. What is the answer?
So I think some of the aspects of the MultiGreen platform that I found to just make a ridiculous amount of good sense, right? And something that we've all been trying to do is, I think it's leveraging some of the aspects that this country historically has been so great at. And we can say the same with what have we seen as a company, what have you seen as a country? We are really good at manufacturing. This country is great. When we start pulling together, you can talk about the automobile industry, or anytime this country's gone to war, we suddenly mobilize. We start printing out these incredibly expensive, technologically advanced, whether it's cars, you name it. We need to do that same thing with the creation of housing, the delivery of housing. We should be printing out, whether on the modular level, the components to quickly assemble and build. Because if we just say, look, what's more likely? We can change the zoning code of every small and large city in this country so that it only takes 3 months to get projects approved. Is that more likely than technological advancements in the construction field, allowing us to deliver a project in 12 months as opposed to 24 months? I'm going to go with the reliance on myself and our company and our partners to say we can take that leap faster than local governments can. And so I think it is that advancement of quickly delivering the modular aspect, which I know you and I, our companies, have spent a lot of time either investing in or trying to make work on projects, having greater consistency with our sustainable goals. You know, as you have worked on, especially, how do we make these systems work where, again, whether it's net zero, how are we ensuring that each one of these projects is really a holistic delivery of what something needs to be successful? Because we understand the grid, when we talk about solar or electricity, that's a precious resource. We all understand that water, whether it's stormwater, erosion, or just potable water, that's a precious resource. If we can start looking at these projects as a way not just to serve the population in that building and to give something to them that's more attainable, whether it's Wi-Fi, everyone gets free Wi-Fi, or utilities are included, it's simplifying, I'd say, what's a pretty complex system. And it is saying, from a holistic perspective, this building doesn't represent housing. This building represents an ethos, right? And that's where you start seeing people say, oh my God. And the educational aspect, imagine when we bring in tenants and we show them on some of our newer projects, like, hey, this is geothermal. Hey, this is solar. This is, photovoltaics. Hey, we have the green gardens, where residents can grow their own food. Hey, do you know about the stormwater management systems? It's like people get excited about science again. And they're like, wow, I thought this was an apartment building. It's like, no, this is an ecosystem. And when we start thinking about that, especially on larger scale projects, oh my God, what if each one of these projects was communities that were delivered independent of the existing utility structures, or grid, or stormwater system, or sewer and water? I'm no longer imposing greater need on an already stretched system. I mean, historically as a country, we built infrastructure really, really well, and then we went on to something else. You know, we don't maintain those things, and it's super expensive to maintain them. So it's incumbent upon us in terms of a life cycle perspective, which is something that you've really focused on. It's not just the delivery. What did it cost to deliver today? What is the real cost to maintain this asset and create the ownership? Because when people feel a level of ownership, we all know that they take better care of it and it becomes their own. Because each one of these projects that we deliver is a business, right? These are small business. They are funded independently. They're special purpose or single purpose entities. We can't commingle them with other things, but they're also communities. And that's what I'm more interested in learning about. And that's what we can all learn about. What worked? What didn't work? You know, getting that consistent feedback and really holding ourselves accountable to say, it's not good enough. It can always be better.
Bobby, you are so articulate, and I'm so excited to be working with you. The leadership that you and Gilbane puts into the industry is fantastic, much appreciated, and long overdue. And with that, I look forward to doing this again with you and revisiting the podcast. We need to share with all of our listeners the progress that we're making on a regular basis. Bobby, that is a great segue to my final question for you today. What does attainability mean to you?
Yeah, I love this question, right? How do you define success? It's something that's incredibly important. When I think about attainability, I think about the difference between little a attainability and big A attainability. And big A means a collective. It's a dream that we dream together, but it's not something that's out of reach. It's something that you understand can be achieved if we collectively roll up our sleeves and determine that what's been going on just isn't working and enough is enough. So it is a collective and creative vision and process that puts us on the track for long-term success. I want to reject the old ways of doing things, because when we realize it just doesn't work, we need to have creative solutions. Attainability is not a one-size-fits-all solution. What works in one part of the country or for one community is fundamentally different than another part of the country, and we need to be respectful of that. So again, it's incumbent upon those in positions of leadership, whether a developer, banks, if you have the resources, that's great. It's important that you deploy them, but please listen. Let us figure out what works and what a community wants before we become with our own prescriptive measures for fixing a problem that we actually may be exacerbating by our own sincere desire to do well. And I'm very sincere about the need to stop being so prescriptive with solutions. We can talk about this from a medical perspective, talk about schools. You know, we do a ton of schoolwork, and what has always been shocking to me is when you go to a school board or a system, they say, this is what a school needs to look like. And it looks like schools that were delivered in 1950. Now, there's been a lot of progress on that front, but do you really need to be so prescriptive? I mean, you think about what do you really need for housing or a school to be successful? And there's been wildly creative approaches. In an urban setting, suburban settings, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So if we continue to try to pound that square peg into the round hole because this is the way it needs to be done, we will never get there. So it is incumbent upon everyone, especially people in a position of leadership, to ask, to listen, and to do their damnedest to find the right partners, local partners, national partners to do something greater. And again, I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. The MultiGreen platform is truly visionary, and it's not something that you're saying is going to happen overnight. You have intentionally built this up and sought the right people, advisors, partners, and we as a company are just incredibly excited to join you on this journey.
Bobby, from all of our families at MultiGreen, we are so excited to be working with you and the Gilbane family.
Thanks, Randy. Likewise, I'm very, very excited to be moving forward with MultiGreen on just a fantastic platform and looking forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Join us as we build 40,000 attainable, sustainable, and tech-enabled multifamily homes by 2030. And if you like the content you're hearing, hit the subscribe button. Follow us at Think MultiGreen and sign up to learn more at www.multi.green.